Kia ora and welcome to the Niggly Niche Cast. It's your boy, the Niggly Dog, Pepsi Panther, Mr. Couple of slippers on the feet, and if those slippers are chandos, we're rocking and rolling. So it's summertime, baby, and that means plenty of cricket to talk about on this episode of the Niche Cast with myself and the Wobbly Wildcard. We have just recorded the warm-up kōrero, bit of warm-up chat for our Patreons. So if you enjoy what you are listening to and what you're reading and all the good Kiwi sporting content that we are delivering through the Niche Case, the best way to support us is on Patreon. And this week's warm-up chat was all about the New Zealand Warriors and just some key ideas regarding the Warriors right now, ahead of a very interesting period coming up that is going to be very fluid, is going to involve a lot of different names and insights. So that was pretty interesting, and that's an example of what we are doing with the Patreon warm-up chats. On today's podcast, we've got a couple Blackcaps squads, Plunkett Shield cricketers rolling around. We have NBA trades and free agency happening, so we're going to put the focus on Steven Adams and just how things all relate to Kiwi Steve. We've got footballing matters to discuss, Kiwi sporting, just general Kiwi sporting antics, and kia ora to the Wobbly Wildcard. What's crack-a-lackin'?
Yeah, mate, not much. I'm just battling away, I suppose. I got so sick late last week, hey. I was had a couple nights in a row just up yakking my guts up over and over, and took away from my writing abilities on sort of Friday and over the weekend. And then, yeah, it was just slowly working my strength back up and getting my appetite going, which is the weird thing, is it's like you're sick for 2 days, but then it's like having like a 3-day hangover afterwards because you got no energy. But I'm getting there. I'm slowly getting there. I had I think I had 4 Weet-Bixes this morning, so that's an improvement on the last couple of days.
It just sounds like 2020.
Yeah, something like that.
A little 2020 microcosm there.
I know. I don't think I had to proper chunder from illness, non-alcohol related, for 6 years or something like that, I swear. And I had food poisoning a couple of weeks ago, so I've had it twice in a space of about a month now, which is very strange. Very 2020.
Very 2020 indeed. And I don't know if there's anything 2020-ish about the Blackcaps, but we do have some Blackcaps.
No, it's very 2019-ish, actually.
There you go. Bit of Blackcaps cricket wildcard. So on Sunday maybe it was. No, Monday. We're recording this on Tuesday. I wrote about the whole New Zealand cricket 2020 landscape and just how all the different pieces to the puzzle relate to each other. Blackcaps 2020 international cricket, the Super Smash, Big Bash as well, because we've got Colin Munro is off to the Big Bash to join Adam Milne, and all of that is really interesting, let alone other bits and bobs that I did write about as well. And then today, later yesterday, late Monday evening, early Tuesday, there was the Blackcaps T20 squad was announced. Also, the Test squad wildcard to face West Indies, but the Test squad is pretty stock standard, other than this fella Colin D and another fella Grandhome, which was a bit weird. Just on the little graphic they did for the Test squad announcements, every player's name is on a single line, and then Colin de Grandhome's name is just Colin D. Next line, Grandhome. So it's 2 separate jokers. I found that funny. What have you... I'm just curious, Wildcard, just how when you see Blackcaps T20 squad, you see Devon Conway selected, Kyle Jamieson is selected as well. as someone who didn't play Blackcaps T20 cricket last summer, he played Test cricket and ODI cricket, but didn't play T20 cricket. I'm not sure if you caught a couple of the vibes I explored in my T20 landscape wrap up, but I'm just curious, what are you thinking about the Blackcaps T20 squad from any angle? But I'm always reminded by what, like you've said a few times, that the Blackcaps T20 team is where the younger players are brought in to like acquaint themselves with Blackcaps cricket. And I, over this like 48 hours, for some reason I've thought a lot about the messaging coming out of New Zealand cricket and the Blackcaps with regards to like their priorities. So for example, the Super Smash is sold as a priority of New Zealand cricket. However, it's not delivered in that way because there's none of the best players are playing. So it's like it's viewed as a headline act of the summer without headline talent. And the T20 squad is like based on the number of T20 internationals we have and the extensive T20 schedule, which makes sense with the 2 World Cups. These are all the pieces that I've written about, so it's all very complex and convoluted. However, there is a heavy T20 schedule, so we're told that T20 cricket, through that idea, is a priority. However, when you get to squad announcements, it's clear that Test cricket is the priority, and there is still that vibe of younger players getting their opportunity through the T20 setup. Not specifically with Devon Conway and Kyle Jamieson, because as I said, Jamieson played Test cricket, then ODI cricket. Devon Conway's 29 years old, so it kind of applies to Conway as in a sense of Conway getting his first opportunity with the Blackcaps in the T20 group. And then you look at the players who are coming in for the third game. Jamieson, Southey and Taylor all drop out, one would assume because of the Test series, and then Doug Bracewell, Scott Kugelheim and Mark Chapman come in to the T20 squad, let alone the idea of like, are the Blackcaps viewing this as just like, we need to get our best T20 team together ahead of this double World Cup T20 situation? I don't know, Wildcard. What do you make of it all? I blabbled on a bit there, but feel free to pick up, anywhere along that line.
Yeah, I don't know, I've had a few thoughts on this. One of them, in keeping with the Colin D and the Gronholm selections, I also got confused reading down the New Zealand cricket, what do you call it, just the article on their website announcing everything, for a similar but different reason, which is that normally they have the picture things in like the square Instagram format shape, and here they had them sort of halved off, and so I was looking at it, trying to like pinch my phone screen to expand it and like, where's the rest of the squad, before counting them up and realizing, they've just used a smaller picture here for some reason. And so that probably reflects more on me than on New Zealand cricket there, but it confused me at first. And I was in the car this morning as well, and on Radio New Zealand they were interviewing Gavin Larson, and I thought, this is lovely to hear Gavin Larson talk about, but of course it was absolutely infuriating, because it was another example that when it comes to the Blackcaps, their relationship with Kiwi media, it's very, very chummy, and it means that there are not difficult questions. And so for like it was only a little, 3 or 4 minute little chat thing there after the sports news, basically. So there wasn't ever going to be too much there, but all they talked about was like, there were about 4 questions about Kane Williamson being injured and how badly is he injured and how soon will he be back 100%. Will he have to play through this injury for a while? Do we have to worry about him missing more time later on? Should he be missing any time at all, or should he just be playing in these 2020s? Why isn't Trent Bolt playing in these 2020s? And then a whole lot of questions about Devon Conway as well. And it was like, these are not the fun narratives. I want to know about like how steady Tom Blundell's spot as an opener is. I want to know about Colin de Gronholm's injury, which has seen him picked for the Test team but not in the 2020 team. Like, I want to know about, I don't know, all these things. Are they considering, like, AJS Patel as a spinner? Is he in the test squad? Is he just there sort of as a backup option? I don't know. There's a lot of much more interesting ways those things could have gone, but I don't think we'll get too much of that until we actually see teams and actually get evidence of how things are going to look. I suppose we stick to the 2020s for now, but there's the main theme that I saw from both these squads is that I guess there's a lot of like there's a lot of people right now who would be very happy if they could go back in time to 2019 and maybe do some things differently, or just like straight up I don't know. It's one of the, like, could I stop the pandemic if I went back in a time machine, or at least just to get like the future back to what the past used to be. The Blackcaps seem to have actually achieved that goal, though. I don't know if they've got a time machine of their own or whatever, but they've picked a squad for both these teams that is exactly the same squad as they would have picked this time a year ago, probably. I mean, Kyle Jamison's come on the scene a little more recently, sort of at the start of this year, before everything got weird, and then Devin Conway obviously becoming eligible more recently, but he'd have been in the team last year if he could have been. It's just, yeah, we've had 11 out of 15 out of 16 days. The 16th day of the first half of the Plunkett Shield is currently ongoing as we're recording. So we've basically had a full 4 rounds of Plunkett Shield action, but we haven't had any 2020 stuff. And there's a 2020 squad that needed to be picked. So really all you can go by with that squad is either picking players based on performances in different formats, which maybe doesn't, so sometimes it meshes. So it's one of my theories that it's like, in terms of compatibility, I think the different formats are like PlayStations, where you can play, I think I haven't played a PlayStation in a very long time, but I assume it's still the case where you could play a PS1 game on a PS2, but you couldn't play a PS2 game on a PS1, you know what I mean? So I think players who are good in the longer formats can slide down to 2020. Like, you got a sound test match technique, you can probably score runs as well in 2020 stuff. If you can score 2020 runs but haven't proven yourself in longer formats, that transition is a lot harder to make. But so, I mean, you could have picked some dudes based on how well they win in Plunkett Shield stuff, and arguably they have with Kyle Jamison, although I think that would have been inevitable anyway, with how well he started his Blackcaps stuff, and yeah, in the ODIs and in the test matches, especially against India. So, I don't know, there just wasn't a whole lot of new evidence that was out there for them to go from, so they kind of just picked a team that looked exactly like what they would have done a year ago. Like Hamish Bennett, I don't think he's played a Plunkett Day. He might not even play 4 days anymore. That probably is a smart thing if that's the case. Like, if this is his avenue to international cricket still, for his sort of like, little, not swan song, what's the word for like the late career renaissance type thing, then sweet as, like, focus on that. Why not? He's a dude who's had a lot of injuries, so you do what you get in where you can. And then I guess the most interesting one here is, well, obviously Daryl Mitchell is playing. Daryl Mitchell and Jimmy Neesham both being there is a symptom of de Gronholm not being there, but that could actually, because de Gronholm's 2020 performances haven't been fantastic. He's been picked largely as a batsman and hasn't scored enough runs to justify that. Neesham and Mitchell are both better bowling options in 2020s. I think if you are going to pick you'd have you'd have room for an extra player or two in a World Cup squad, but I do think this is interesting for de Gronholm's place in the 2020 team. I think that's one aspect of this. And then I think the other aspect of this, which is far and away the most important, or not most important, but the most interesting thing to me, I guess, from all this, is that just looking at the 2020 squad in particular, well, first of all, the most interesting of all these squads was the New Zealand A squad by a mile, because that was the only one where we didn't get basically the same players as we would have got, like, as we would have expected 9-10 months ago. But one of the interesting things from that A squad was that they didn't pick players, the A games would clash with this 2020 series, and I think there were a couple players who were picked to start and then picked to leave. I think Conway is one of them, who's going to play the first bit of the games and then disappear, and then it was sort of a hint that maybe he'd be involved in something else. And notably, Glenn Phillips wasn't there, having played New Zealand A stuff a year ago, which got me thinking, well, maybe Glenn Phillips is going to be in the 2020 squad then. And then, lo and behold, he is, and Colin Munro isn't. And there's a quote here in the New Zealand cricket thing, which I'll throw back to you. It says, Stead also clarified the decision to omit Colin Munro from the 2020 squad. Quote, so this is Gary Stead. With Colin heading to the Big Bash and therefore unavailable for the Pakistan T20 series pre-Christmas, so that's the Pakistan series as well, that's not just this West Indies one, but the next one, the selectors are keen to look at other options at the top of the order. Which sounds to me like they've moved on. Like, that doesn't sound very promising for Colin Munro coming back into the team after that Pakistan series next year and moving towards the World Cup, plural, World Cups plural. That doesn't sound too great considering Colin Munro has well and truly lost his spot in the ODI squad, was never really I think he did play one test back in the day, didn't he? But never really a serious option in the test team, although arguably his Plunkett Shield record says he should have at some point. We might have seen the last of Colin Munro as an international cricketer there, Doc.
So, in writing about it today, I included screenshotted two paragraphs from the press release about these Blackcaps squads. The first was about Glenn Phillips, because it says, Auckland Aces batsman Glenn Phillips has earned a T20 recall after impressing at the recent Caribbean Premier League. So with regards to that, Glenn Phillips has been in the top 5 batsmen at the Caribbean Premier League for the last 3 years. He is like top 10, I think I found. Let me just look it up right now. He's the second best Kiwi to ever play in the Caribbean Premier League behind Colin Munro. And he is 14th overall in total CPL runs. So most of the dudes on that ranking started playing Caribbean Premier League in 2013. Glenn Phillips is 14th overall forever, having only started in 2017. So the New Zealand cricket, they alluded to Glenn Phillips having a good 2020 CPL. Glenn Phillips has been the best batsman of the CPL for like the last 3 years. So I'll get to Colin Munro, but I think another player of a similar ilk, as far as the best way to frame this is, are you part of a Blackcaps New Zealand T20 First 11? Based on what I've seen from Glenn Phillips in New Zealand, for New Zealand, as well as what he's done overseas in T20 tournaments, I'd suggest that Glenn Phillips is part of maybe not quite the first 11 strictly, but just like, okay, top 15 2020 players from New Zealand, let's go. Glenn Phillips has to be there. Maybe Hamish Rutherford doesn't have to be in that group. However, Hamish Rutherford has consistently performed pretty good in the Super Smash, and this year in England's T20 Blast, he was one of the best batsmen there. But he doesn't get a look in. So that leads me to Colin Munro, because what Colin Munro has basically done here, Wildcard, is something that I have suggested would happen, and already has happened, with lesser notable players, like someone like Mitchell McClenaghan or Anton Devcic. This is the most pressing issue in Kiwi cricket right now, is a T20 player deciding to play Big Bash instead of Blackcaps T20 cricket. So as you set it up nicely. Colin Munro, maybe if the stars align, he might play ODI cricket. He's not playing Test cricket, and his decision is, okay, I have a Big Bash opportunity in front of me. if I take that Big Bash opportunity, because of how New Zealand cricket have created this problem themselves, because they schedule their T20 cricket at the same time as the Big Bash. So I wrote, this is part of the T20 landscape stuff I talk about, because if you have the Super Smash at the same time as Blackcaps T20 cricket and the Big Bash, there's no imports coming from overseas to make the Super Smash better, and there's no Blackcaps to make the Super Smash better, so the Super Smash is kinda not a great competition. So these are all New Zealand cricket decisions that have created, like, not necessarily problems right now, but I can see that this is going to be a interesting issue for New Zealand cricket, because Colin Munro has basically just said, look, I'm choosing between Blackcaps T20 cricket and the Big Bash. That is the decision. And he has taken up a Big Bash opportunity. So to get to your point, now we are going to see the perspective of New Zealand cricket, because Colin Munro is going to miss 2 2020 series due to his Big Bash commitments. And fair enough, like, if I'm in Colin Munro's shoes, I'm doing the same thing. Like, a lot of these, there's only a small group who are like certified T20 players. So all the other players, if they have Test cricket, yeah, you got to commit to New Zealand cricket and Test cricket and ODI cricket. That's fair play. However, if you're just a T20 player, like, if I'm in Colin Munro's situation, I'm thinking I can go to Australia, probably earn more money. I'm going to play in front of bigger crowds on a bigger platform at a higher level. Like, maybe Big Bash is a higher level of T20 cricket than what Blackcaps versus West Indies is going to be. So if you're Colin Munro, maybe it's an easy choice depending on your vibe. For me, it's an easy choice. If I'm Colin Munro and I've got a Big Bash opportunity, snap that bad boy up. Do it. However...
Well, also, like, the one very, very relevant point to that as well is if you're pointing out the financial side of it, he's just lost his Blackcaps Central contract, hasn't he?
Yeah, but he's done that because of the T20 stuff. So it's not necessarily like he's lost it and now he wants to pursue other things. Well, maybe it did because he lost his ODI spot. But even if, like, he had a New Zealand cricket contract in this moment, it would still present Colin Munro with a decision, and if he had a New Zealand contract at this time, choosing BBL, there might be ramifications with the contract. So, yeah, from a financial perspective, like, you got to weigh up, like, how do I make my money here? But it's not like like, Colin Munro would still make decent money if he was playing for the Blackcaps T20 team, just playing games, because you still get match fees. You get match payments for all the domestic cricket as well. So if Colin Munro
match fees and stuff
is just taking the piss in Plunkett Shield, smacking 150 off 20 balls, he's still earning a living. But the most important thing here is what New Zealand cricket do when Colin Munro returns. Because you were kind of saying that this might be the end of the road for Colin Munro. However, from a T20 cricket standpoint, if Colin Munro goes over to the Big Bash and dominates, well, for sure, he's got to be in a Blackcaps T20 first 11. And that's where we will understand the perspective of New Zealand cricket, because if Colin Munro gets shafted, then we can see that New Zealand cricket do not want their players going over to the Big Bash, taking away from their own Blackcaps T20 cricket and Super Smash. Simply put, if Colin Munro...
Well, I think we've already seen that.
Well, we haven't, because...
Well, I think we've already seen that, because they only said...
Well, Colin Munro might come back, and there's going to be... There's a series against Australia after this. So, if Colin Munro returns from the Big Bash, and granted, he's got to be in good form, and he scores runs in the Big Bash, he should be in the Blackcaps T20 squad for, I think they have 5 games against Australia. So at that point, we're going to see how Colin Munro is viewed by New Zealand cricket. I don't necessarily put a great deal of stock in what has happened now for the West Indies and the Pakistan series.
Yeah, but like the Gary Stead quote only mentioned the Pakistan series that he was unavailable for. They sort of like, we'll read it again. With Colin heading to the Big Bash and therefore unavailable for the Pakistan T20 series pre-Christmas, the selectors are keen to look at other batting options at the top of the order. So like, they're not saying he's unavailable for this series. They're saying he's unavailable for next series. Therefore, we're advertising his job. I think that's pretty writing on the wall there. But the point you make, if he goes to the Big Bash and dominates, yeah, you'd be crazy not to put him back in the conversation. But I think they're very clearly thinking beyond him at this point. I mean, they've said it. They've said they're thinking beyond him at this point.
But logistically, he's unavailable for the West Indies series. Because he's going to have to go to Australia. There's quarantines. The Big Bash in Australia. Let me just check when it starts.
Well, it's certainly easier for all involved if he's not in this series, whether he could squeeze it in or not, because they're only it's 3 games in the space of about a week at the end of this month, but yeah.
So the T20, first of T20s starts November 27th. The Big Bash starts on December 10th. So there's basically no way that Colin Munro could have played against the West Indies. Because he has to go over to Australia. He's got to start training. He's got to do all the logistical stuff that has to be done in 2020. So you're kind of alluding to Colin Munro being scratched for this series based on his decision to play BBL, and you're kind of saying that the ramifications are already present. I'm a bit more lenient towards what Gary Stead and the Blackcaps are doing for the West Indies and the Pakistan series. Like, logistically, there's basically no way Colin Munro could have played against the West Indies. He's definitely unavailable to play against Pakistan. So, the semantics suggested, like, the semantics are, as you said, like, the semantics of what Gary Stead said suggests that Colin Munro was already shafted from the West Indies series. I just think that they didn't really highlight that it was just a unavailability.
Well, do you remember when they dropped Ross Taylor a couple years ago, and then they sort of specifically mentioned that he had been dropped when they could have just come out and said he's still recovering from his eye injury, like this was just after the surgery a couple months later. Like, they just didn't cover their asses in the way where they could have and protected Ross Taylor there, and it became a bit of a drama. And remember we wrote a few things about that. Like, that's the funny thing with the semantics when it comes to Gary Stead wasn't there then, but that was Gavin Larson who was speaking then. But Gavin Larson is still a selector and still talking. Gary Stead is a very similar character in that these guys they all seem like quite nice dudes. Like, they seem like genuine, considerate blokes, and therefore they're really bad at lying. And therefore, when they get asked to explain certain questions and do want to protect players, they often show their hand a little more than they mean to, which is why it's quite funny, and also often quite telling, reading like the little quotes in the thing to get perspectives, which often I think say more than they meant them to say. But yeah, we shall see.
The important part here at Wildcard is what I referred to with Glenn Phillips, because they said Glenn Phillips has earned a T20 recall after impressing at the recent CPL. So basically, whoever's writing these press releases has no idea what's actually doing in Kiwi cricket, because Glenn Phillips has dominated the CPL for a couple of years now and is undeniably one of the best T20 batsmen from Aotearoa right now. So if getting based on that alone, they write these things very strangely and they highlight things very strangely. I think back to last summer how every squad announcement included a list of 5 players, whatever it was, who were unavailable for selection due to injury. And I was like, okay, these dudes didn't get selected, but they're still dudes, kind of going to what you're saying about the just trying to please everyone and be nice to everyone. It was like
Yeah.
like these players are all out injured, and so we're gonna write down the squad, and then we're gonna write down the squad of players unavailable for selection due to injury.
Yeah, as if Adam Milne was going to get in there ahead of Tim Southey or something anyway. Like, this dude wasn't going to get picked, so you don't really need to make excuses for him.
Yeah, and here's the squad of players who no one knows about who didn't get selected as well. Like, it just seems a bit strange. Which I think maybe, like, how are you feeling about New Zealand cricket dramas or antics right now? Like, we've basically highlighted a few little spots of weirdness. I would throw up the A squad as a spot of weirdness as well, considering that the whole Otago Volts seam attack was selected. There's no Canterbury seamers, even though Canterbury have like had the best seam attack of the Plunkett Shield thus far. Like, just stuff like that is still happening, and I am curious. Like, I've already got a feeling of like, maybe it's just because I've been in the weeds about this over the last couple of days, writing about the T20 landscape and all that stuff. I'm already feeling a bit of shenanigans coming on wildcard. And I'm not sure if you can sense it, like, just from what you're getting from New Zealand cricket. And I think the idea of, like, how these teams are being presented to us is interesting. I don't know if it's, like, if I'm overselling it or if I'm just misreading it, but it's hard to gauge, like, how New Zealand cricket and the Blackcaps, like, where they rank their T20 team, where they rank their Super Smash, where they rank their Test team, like, or whether New Zealand cricket have priorities here and their priorities are X, Y, and Z. However, the players have their priorities here and their priorities are QRS. Like, it seems like there's just it doesn't seem like everything is in perfect alignment, perfect unison. These are the formats we are targeting. Because if you just look at it, like last summer, there was a lot of ODI cricket. Well, not last summer, but the summer before the World Cup, there was a lot of ODI cricket, and we're building into the World Cup, and it makes sense, and you can see what's happening. Yeah, we want more Test cricket, but we can see that there's an ODI World Cup, and that's the plan. Right now, yeah, we love Test cricket, but let's be honest, the Test Championship is a farce, which was also quite strange in the press release. There was something about, we've had to make a decision on Kane and Trent to prioritise the Test matches. There's no secret we're right in the hunt for the World Test Championship final following our 2-0 win over India, and having Trent and Kane fully fit and focused for the upcoming series will be crucial. So I just view the Test Championship as a farce. Like, it's a stupid competition now that they've had to rejig like the points and all that stuff, which was already quite difficult to follow. So it's like there's a priority on Test cricket, and there are two 2020 World Cups that could be a priority if you straight up want to go out and win both of them, which New Zealand could do with the correct planning and evaluation of 2020 talent. But based on the squad selected here, I don't know if that's exactly the case, because I don't think Hamish Bennett is going to take part. I don't think Hamish Bennett's going to bowl one ball in either 2020 World Cup. And it's just like, I'm just a bit confused as to how, like, what priority New Zealand cricket has. What is the focus of cricket matters right now? And as I talk about it, I understand that is a very difficult thing when you're trying to deal with Test cricket, ODI cricket, and T20 cricket. It's quite hard to lay all those things out with a clear, concise plan and list of priorities with what you want to achieve. It's difficult, but I still sense like I get none of that from the Blackcaps and New Zealand cricket right now. How do you feel like the same thing as far as the wider shenanigans New Zealand cricket goes? And then what are your thoughts on, I just keep referring to priorities. I'm not sure if that's the right word, but what, like, just the clarity around different formats and what the focus is.
Yeah, I mean, there's always some level of shenanigans going on, though, isn't there? Like, New Zealand cricket and the Blackcaps organisation tend to be on the more complacent side of things at times, and there's always a tendency to just pick the dudes they picked before, and this is exactly what I was saying about these squads just looking like, and I think the 2020 squad is actually more indicative of this, even though you've got Conway coming in, and you can say like Glenn Phillips getting back in with a genuine chance to play a lot. I'm curious to see who opens, actually, because I think both those two would be an option alongside Martin Guptill. Conway would give you the left-hander. Phillips would give you familiarity from those two having done that before for Auckland. So that will be interesting to see how that goes. Who actually literally fills Colin Munro's boots. But there's always some level of shenanigans going on, and the like, even just looking at the three players who have called up when the three dudes leave for, was it the last? It's the third 2020, just the third one, when Doug Bracewell, Scott Kugelheim, and Mark Chapman come in. Like, these are also guys who, and like, it's cool to see Chapman in particular coming in, and Bracewell has been bowling well in Plunkett Shield too, so it's not like he's not worthy of a recall. But also, these are three dudes who have been given opportunities in the last couple years. Kugelheim, I don't understand why he keeps getting picked when it would have sounded like a one-off game at the end of a 2020 series would have seemed like the perfect opportunity to bowl someone like, I don't know, a Jacob Duffy or someone like that. But apparently not. They've just, again, like, picked a team that could have been the team that they picked a year ago, or even maybe 2 or 3 years ago. It's very, very, like, just picking up where they left off kind of thing and ignoring everything else that's happened since they last played 2020 cricket. So it's confusing, but it's also the first thing of the summer, so I don't, maybe they're just looking for a baseline, I don't know, and also, I guess, probably a point to be, I get the feeling, because Gavin Larson on the radio also made that point about prioritizing the Test Championship and whatever, and I don't think the Test Championship is as much as a farce as you seem to think so, because I like the means of an end. I mean, the competition structure is a complete farce, because like, from the very start, beyond everything else with having to reschedule stuff and all the dramas like that they're trying to work through at the moment, it was a farce from day one, because India refused to play Pakistan. So each team doesn't play two of the other teams that they're supposed to be playing. So not everyone plays everyone, which is weird, and it automatically skews things, because you're just not getting a competitive balance out of that. And it's entirely because of the BCCI, by the way. And, well, I suppose also the ICC for backing down to them and letting them do whatever they want and run the game at their own behest. But I do like the means to an end of, at least, that allows us to play more Test cricket and to be able to say that they care about Test cricket. Because I think all along, the players have always said things like, well, you know, Test cricket's the pinnacle, it's the one that and it's very clear that in terms of, like, do you take the players who are available, and actually, like, someone like Colin Munro might say something different, because Colin Munro's never been given a chance to play proper Test cricket consistently, you know. But someone like the all format players, the Williamson, Southey, Taylor, etc., Bolt, you know, those guys, I think all of them would rank it in exactly the same way that most fans would as well, which is Test cricket first, ODI cricket second, T20 cricket third, and it's relatively obvious, I think, by their demeanors, even if they won't say it, that that's how they feel. And I think probably a lot of the people in the New Zealand cricket boardroom, who are all very invested in cricket because they work in the sport for a living, Gavin Larson included, and all these kinds of people, I think they would all say the same thing as well. I mean, Larson was a stereotypical 1990s ODI specialist for the Blackcaps, so maybe there's a little bit of a skew there, but actually ODI cricket is the one that gets shafted the most of all at the moment over the last 2 years, so not that it's his choice, but not that he has any say over the schedules or anything like that, but, like, I suspect the people themselves would all have said, yeah, well, this is the correct hierarchy, this is how it should be. It's just a matter of, like, them adding that word but. Like, Test cricket is the pinnacle, but T20 makes us more money. So it was always kind of a reluctant thing when 2020 started getting to dominate the sort of the fixture list, like the home summer fixture list over the last 4 or 5 years, since however long that trend has sort of been obvious, the last 2 or 3 years in particular. So like I once you get into that kind of reluctancy, it's always like you're dealing with compromises, and compromises never lead to the best decisions. So I think that's been the not the symptom, the cause of a lot of these shenanigans, and the seeming lack of hierarchy is because of that. It's because there's an emotional and an intellectual clash between what is and what should be, as to how that affects the Blackcaps in general. I am less worried about it than I have been in the past, because if with the like at the peak of the lesson days, I'm thinking the obvious the peak is also whatever the opposite of a peak is, the valley, I suppose. If we're tossing bats here, the low point was the Champions Trophy a couple years back. R.I.P. the Champions Trophy, by the way, which I think is the only major trophy that the Blackcaps have ever won. When they got bottled by like Bangladesh in a must-win game, went out in the group stage, and the preparation had been shocking the whole way up, and it was so obvious they were leading themselves towards disaster and whatever. But like since then, the team has got a lot stronger. There are sort of those all-format players that I mentioned before who carry the load, whether it's a 2020, whether it's a ODI, whether it's a test match. There are reliable guys who are going to perform, and therefore the team is very strong, and I think that overwhelms most of the shenanigans and means you don't really have to worry about them so much, because we're only really talking about whether Hamish Bennett should have been picked as the how many players are in that squad? 1, 2, 3, 4, 13, is it? So like the 13th man out of 13 players in a squad, which is pretty inconsequential in terms of the bigger side of it. Like you said, I don't think he's going to be bowling any deliveries at a World Cup. He might not even bowl any deliveries in this series. So you hope he gets a go in the third game ahead of the guys who were ahead of like Bracewell and Kugelheim. But I was looking at what a squad would look like, because it's not just that Munro's missing. There's also de Gronholm has been batting top 5 and he's not there, which means that because there aren't a huge amount of batsmen, Williamson isn't there either. So arguably you don't have 3 of the guys who over the last few years would have been in these roles. That means whether Conway or Phillips opens, whoever doesn't is going to be batting at 3 or 4. Seifert's going to be batting in the top 4. Ross Taylor's locked on number 5 lately. And then you're getting into all-rounders and whatever. So maybe you only pick 1 out of Mitchell or Neesham, and then you're only picking 1 out of Southey, Bennett, Ferguson, and, well, not 1, but 3 out of Southey, Bennett, Ferguson, and Jamieson, unless you drop a spinner. But Santner and Sodhi have been playing basically every game they've been available for in the 2020 stuff for a long time, and 2020s doesn't really matter so much about the pitch conditions when it comes to spinning. You just got to be able to have those variations and whatever, and bowl to scoreboard pressure and all that, and these two are excellent at both of those things, well, respectively anyway. So it's ultimately, I think the shenanigans don't affect the team so much. However, on the thing of Hamish Bennett, I will throw back to you that because I went and looked up that paragraph you mentioned about Glenn Phillips has earned a T20 recall after impressing at the recent Caribbean Premier League, blah, blah, blah. Which I guess, as you're saying that, I realised, well, we're playing the West Indies as well, isn't it? So we'll be batting against some of the same bowlers that he would have been pummeling in those ones too. So that's probably part of the thought process too. But that paragraph then ends, while Hamish Bennett has retained his spot after strong showings against India earlier this year. So I looked up his numbers against India earlier this year. He got none for 36 from 4 overs, none for 29 from 3 overs, 3 for 54 from 4 overs, 2 for 41 from 4, and then 1 for 21 from 4. From memory, we got swept in that series too. I think there were a couple super overs, but that adds up to 6 wickets from 19 overs, average of 30, economy rate of 9.5, strike rate of a pretty decent 19. But the 2 games in which he took multiple wickets were also the 2 in which he went for the most runs. So I don't know if I would classify those as strong showings per se. I think they were relatively average showings considering they were all in losing instances, but maybe that's just part of those shenanigans. But yeah, if we're talking about the 13th player in a 13-man squad, maybe it doesn't matter as much as it used to.
Yeah, I agree. We're deep in the weeds here, but I want to go deeper because I'm glad you...
Yes, please.
I'm glad you mentioned those Hamish Bennett stats because you also threw a bit of shade at Scott Kugelheim, and I just want to raise some Scott Kugelheim numbers here for your wild card. Career T20 international bowling average of 41.75. So that's not good reading for Scott Kugelheim in the T20 format. However, Scott Kugelheim, T20 international cricket in 2019, he averaged 52. In 2020, he averaged 24.6.
Okay.
And then, so that is earlier this year, Blackcaps T20 international cricket, Scott Kugelheim averages 24.6, which is a notable improvement on 2019. And then if you compare Scott Kugelheim's 2020 international average of 41.75 to his 2020 career average of 29.5, that adds a bit of spice into the mix as well. And then to finish with wildcard, who was the best bowler in the Caribbean Premier League this year?
I have no idea.
It was Mr. Scott Kugelheim.
Oh, there you go.
So this year alone, because maybe it was because I had the same impression. Scott Kugelheim has kind of struggled for New Zealand in T20 cricket, and an average of 41.75 reflects that. However, when you break it down, in 2020, he's a pretty good bowler because he's done it for the Blackcaps earlier this year, and then he had a real strong CPL campaign where he took 17 wickets, 15.64 average, 7.78 RPO. So, if you ask me right now, who's better, Hamish Bennett or Scott Kugelheim, based on the numbers that you just mentioned from earlier this year against India as well, to me, it's a no-brainer. Scott Kugelheim should be there ahead of Hamish Bennett. But again, that's deep in the weeds, but it just shows, I don't know what it shows, but it's just weird.
Yeah, Kugelheim played 3 games against India in sort of January, February when that series was on. He got none for 10 off 2 overs in the first one. He got 1 for 39 in the next and 2 for 25 in the next one. So 2 for 25 is very good against India. It's only a shade over a run a ball, a couple wickets. That's where that average is coming from, would be that performance. Just the 10 overs that were going off though. But it is an improvement because he'd only taken 2 wickets in a T20 game once in his 11 previous career games before that. So, yeah, maybe he turned a corner. Plus, I guess if you're going to say pick Glenn Phillips on the back of his 2020 showings and specifically mentioning only the recent Caribbean Premier League, then you do have to give similar leeway to Scott Kugelheim as well, don't you?
Yeah, and again, if I'm of the belief that Hamish Bennett won't bowl a delivery in the T20 World Cups, plural, well, why don't you just have Scott Kugelheim, who is far more likely to be in a Blackcaps T20 first 11 than Hamish Bennett. Both of them shouldn't be in the first 11 when you're dealing with Tim Southey, Trent Boult, Lockie Ferguson, 2 spinners, couple of rounders. There's no real need for Hamish Bennett or Scott Kugelheim. But if you're choosing between Hamish Bennett and Scott Kugelheim for T20 World Cups, to me it's a fairly easy decision. Man, that paragraph is terrible.
Yes, it reads like a PR person really having to stretch the notes, they told me to write this, but how do I make it make sense? I don't know.
It's one paragraph that mentions 2 players that it's it's all correct. Like, it's not false, it's not misinformation. It's just very strange because it's Glenn Phillips has
extremely selective.
Glenn Phillips has dominated the CPL. Hamish Bennett wasn't so good against India, and then there was another player who was good against India and was the best bowler in the CPL this year. It's all very strange.
Which seems like an opportune moment just to dangle out a little carrot on a stick, or to the listeners out there, and point out that Neil Wagner has never played an international game in any non-test format. He's never bowled an international white ball delivery in his entire career. Just seems like something worth mentioning while we're having this conversation.
Indeed. Oh, undervalued old Wagner. Like, he could have been a machine, white ball machine.
Immensely.
The other thing, because we're in the middle of a Plunkett Shield round of cricket here, Wildcard, and part of my write-up about the squads for the Blackcaps today, like, we don't need to do an audit of Plunkett Shield cricket just because it's happening, and it will probably align that we can next week do a full look back at the Plunkett Shield, because this is the final round of the year before it starts again next year. But there's some interesting alignment, because Devon Conway's leading all run scorers at the time of recording on Tuesday morning. Kyle Jamieson is tied with Will Williams on 20 wickets at the top of the wicket taker chart. So Kyle Jamieson and Devon Conway are like the super duper dudes of Kiwi cricket right now. Not just in terms of Devon Conway leading all run scorers across all formats last summer, Kyle Jamieson blasting onto the scene with the Blackcaps last summer. They are also the best performers in Plunkett Shield cricket this summer. And to me that is rather interesting, because the best performers in the Plunkett Shield right now are all a bit younger. And a couple of weeks ago we talked about, I just went back to maybe 2017, and it was like a veteran crew of Plunkett Shield performers. But I think there is a deep sea change happening way beneath the surfaces of Kiwi cricket, where it's just a lot younger across the domestic circuit. And now that a lot of those younger players are entering their mid to late 20s and the prime of their careers, they've played a fair amount of cricket, most of them, I think it's going to make things really interesting, bigger picture. So last episode was the cricket kerfuffle episode, and I had a sense that things were going to be a bit, well, based on the summer of transition and transformation, I think this summer is going to be even more chaotic as far as players coming and going from various squads goes. And I don't know if this is part of it, but I think it's it's a factor, because, okay, the top 5 leading run scorers, Devon Conway, he's 29 years old. He's in his first little Blackcap stint. Second, at the time of recording, is Joe Carter, 27 years old. Ben Horn, third, 26 years old. Ken McClure, fourth, 26 years old. Nick Kelly, fifth, 27 years old. Bowlers, Kyle Jamieson, first, 25 years old. Will Williams, second, 28 years old, but he's only played a couple domestic games. Jacob Duffy, 26 years old. Fraser Sheet, 22 years old. Daryl Mitchell, 29 years old. He made his test debut last summer. So the 3 oldest players all have a little asterisk. Daryl Mitchell just came into the Blackcaps setup last summer. Devon Conway has had to wait for eligibility. And Will Williams is a bit older, but he's still at the start of his domestic cricket career. And the rest of them, 7 out of the 10 players, are all younger than 27 years old, or 27 or younger. I believe that is pretty interesting. When we're looking at just the makeup of New Zealand cricket, I believe that this could help propel some of the chaos that I believe is going to happen just in terms of players coming and going from various squads, injuries, availability, and stuff like that. Most of them are going to be replaced by younger players. Like, if you're coming into any Blackcaps squad, you're probably going to be a younger player, and you're not necessarily going to be a Hamish Bennett or an Anaru Kitchen. The only dude who I can think of is Hamish Rutherford, who does perform strongly more recently and is quite consistently overlooked. I'm not sure if his Blackcaps days are just completely finished, but there's no George Worker's not going to play for New Zealand again. I don't think. I don't know if you're going to see kind of I don't know if who else wildcard? Maybe like a late career resurgence.
Greg Hayes, Seth Rance.
Well, more historically, like Jeetan Patel coming in later on in his career to do a job for the Blackcaps. Like a spinners, it's a bit different, but just thinking back over the last 10 years, it feels like there are, when a player needed to be called up to the Blackcaps, they were usually an older trooper, right? Like, now I believe those players getting called into the Blackcaps are going to be a lot younger, and that is changing the whole face of Kiwi cricket.
Well, this is genuinely something I've been trying to find a way to write about since during lockdown, when I was, doing a couple different sort of study-based ideas from the Blackcaps thing, and then the Blackcaps squad list came out at some point, and just looking at that squad list, and it just fulfilling what was already something that seemed very clear to me, which is that the Blackcaps do not pick a lot of young players. Like, if you consider other national teams around, I think, thinking specifically of the All Whites, for example, if you look at the ages of some of the All Whites guys, if they were ever to be able to pick a team that would play, you'd still have Chris Wood, who's 28, 29, around that range. You'd have Winston Reid, 31, 32, something like that. Michael Boxall, 30. You'd have players in that age range, which is where most of the best Blackcaps are around the moment. You'd also, though, have a lot of guys who are 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, in that range. Quite a lot of those guys coming through because of just whatever the state of the sport at the moment is. There is this great generation of Kiwi footballers on the emergence, and maybe there's that wave. Well, certainly there is that wave. Undeniably, look, you've just went through the stats and shown there is that wave of people in their cricket is more of a late bloomer sport, so with the equivalent of that is more like 22 to 26 age range. There's definitely a wave of that coming through in the Plunket Shield stuff. It's just a matter of how quickly that translates to international cricket, and seats at the table at international cricket are not easy to come by. There's the Blackcaps might play 5, 6 tests in a year. If they're lucky, they might not even get to that. 11 players per test, most of the same players, not a lot, not a high attritional sort of rate when it comes to injuries and stuff like that in this sport. Not a lot of rotation, no need for rotation if you don't play that much, especially Test Championship moment. There's more emphasis on, certainly when the Blackcaps are playing up to that, which they seem to be, more emphasis on every single result. It's not just about the series result. You get points for the games too, so you got to win them. No dead rubbers, therefore. So those opportunities don't come around a whole lot, and it was really clear looking at the New Zealand cricket squad list, when the contracts came out, is that the very few people under the age of 27. 27 is about that buffer when it comes to the Blackcaps. Before that, you're a young cricketer. You might not feel as young in your mid-20s in regular society, whatever. You've been out of university a couple of years, whatever. But in terms, in cricketing senses, that is a young cricketer. Will Young is only just, how old's Will Young now? 28 or something like that? He's about in that range. He's only just now tipping into the point where he can say, I don't know, I haven't played international cricket yet. This is getting a little bit annoying. And maybe he'll get a chance in that test squad. Or maybe he's just going to be the new Matt Henry who's always picked and always gets the to carry the drinks or whatever. But that was actually a notable point of that thing, was that Conway wasn't in the test squad, Will Young was. So there's nice, at least a bit of continuity there. Although, I don't know that Will Young's done a whole lot in the Plunkett Shield yet, but I'd have to check that. I can't remember him doing anything. So, all of which is to wrap around a point of, like, I've been trying to come up with some wider context to make this less of an idea and more of an article, but that might be it. I don't know. Like, the Blackcaps generally are not a team that picks a whole lot of young dudes, but maybe there is that pushing through. I don't know. But then the thing with age as well is that the older guys get older, and then the younger guys get older, and then everyone gets older, and then new young guys come through, and then you're like, the guys who are stepping up at like age 23, 24 might have to wait till they're 27 or 28 to get a go, and then the Blackcaps overall like average age thing doesn't really change, but you still end up at that same kind of point where they are. I don't know, but I don't know. That's definitely something that's interesting me, because that's something I have been actually keeping an eye out for a few months, is looking at these kind of things and just like the career progression of cricketers with an eye on the Blackcaps. And yeah, it's all more I don't know, the ingredients to the recipe. I don't know what that, you can fill out the metaphor better than I can.
I think so the Blackcaps skewing older right now, that's a product of the past decade of domestic cricket skewing much older. And so those players, most of them had to wait longer because everything in New Zealand cricket was a bit older. So now the Blackcaps like test team is a bit older. However, everything below it skews younger, because if you're looking at other players in the mix, I did a little, so that you had the top 5 batsmen and bowlers in the Plunkett Shield this summer, but you've also got Glenn Phillips is 23, Mark Chapman's 26, Tim Seifert is 25, Ish Sodhi, Mitchell Santner, Scott Kugelheim, Matt Henry, they're all between 27 and 28 years old. Henry Cooper's pretty good, he's 27 years old. Leo Carter's pretty good, he's 25 years old. Like, it's kind of across the board beneath the test team, everything is pretty young. And I don't know what that is going to mean moving forward, but I can at least recognize that it is very different to how things were, because it used to just be strictly Grizzly veteran domestic cricket when I started covering domestic cricket like this. Like, you think back to Wellington Firebirds, they had Michael Papps and Luke Woodcock opening the batting, Hamish Bennett bowling, Jeetan Patel bowling. Auckland Aces, you kind of had that bully team with Colin de Grandhomme, Colin Munro, Martin Guptill, bunch of other players as well. So it was, and obviously the Northern Knights, they would have had, the Anton Devchiches, the Graham Aldridge, like all those sort of characters were the foundation, the core of each domestic team, whereas now the foundations of those teams are all much younger, and it just seems like a swell moving towards the test team, and I don't know what it means, but it's interesting. It is fun to explore. Right, do you want to move on to
I guess when you have that thing where you've got a lot of players from us, I mean, because like the Blackcaps, it's not like they've got no one under the age of 27 and then everybody is a wide ranges above that. Is very much like a bunch of players like Southey, Bolt, Williamson played together for years and years, and then you get like this kind of little generation, I guess, and then because it's like a reaction to that fact that there aren't that many even at domestic level, like there's not that many places to go around. There's only 8 rounds of Plunkett Shield a year, etc. You often do see some of the older guys come back for the shorter form stuff as well. I guess that's just kind of like when you do get a really good generation, a couple year groups in a row which are just really strong with a number of strong players. They do kind of block things for everyone else. And then when they get older and retire, then there's suddenly just like open spaces for everyone else to come and compete. And I think clearly that's what we're at right now, is just a few of those older guys have gone off the other end and retired into, their next careers or whatever. In Jeetan Patel's case, he's about to become a Spark Sport commentator. So that leaves empty spaces suddenly, and those things are rare, and so you get a whole flurry of people all rushing into to challenge. And I don't know, maybe in 10 years' time, these dudes will all be blocking the next lot.
Steven Adams wildcard.
Yes.
What do you... So the Oklahoma City Thunder, they traded away Chris Paul. They seem to be changing what they're up to. So even like at the end of the season when the Thunder left the bubble, it seemed like everyone just kind of assumed that that Chris Paul would move on and that they would trade Chris Paul. Just checking like how that trade unfolded and the players the Thunder received back, it fits into the mold of Sam Presti, the Thunder GM, boss man. Like he got 4 players back as well as a draft pick or 2 just for Chris Paul. And so, like, I'm tuned into the NBA, so I'm not, like, coming at it from a full Gumby perspective. And I'm trying to just figure out how Steven Adams fits into this. And there is a decent case for Steven Adams staying with the Oklahoma City Thunder and the Thunder continuing to move forward with Steven Adams. They've got a couple players like Ricky Rubio, he's an NBA veteran at this stage. The Thunder, it's not like the Thunder, I think ultimately what I'm getting at is not, while there is a high possibility that this might happen, it's not the only possibility that the Thunder go on a complete rebuild, because they've got like a couple hundred draft picks with what they've been doing. So they've got like a clear route to getting a young group of talent coming through and building up and becoming a factor in the NBA with the talent that they have developed. But it's not as though their only option is to strip it all down and rebuild. And if they were to strip it down and rebuild, it would make sense to ship Steven Adams off to a different team in return for like draft picks or younger players. So this might change at any moment with what the Thunder do with Steven Adams, but it's kind of 50-50. Like they can keep Steven Adams and rebuild with a decent crop of players around him. Steven Adams has like a certain level of equity from a cultural standpoint with the Thunder. So I don't know why the Thunder would want to just kick Steven Adams to the curb. Like, he's pretty much Oklahoma hearty. He's Ngati Thunder, if you will. But then also from an NBA business perspective where there's no, like, Kiwi good vibes, it's a smart business move to get rid of Steven Adams and to move forward on a different trajectory. So how do you see those things playing out specifically in relation to Steven Adams?
It's a little bit of a tricky one because of all the moving pieces. I'm just looking at the Watch Bomb from this morning. He's like, where are we? See what they got back in return. The deal sends Chris Paul and Abdel Nader to the Suns for Kelly Oubre, Ricky Rubio, Ty Jerome, Jalen LeCue, and a 2022 first round pick. So, I mean, I don't know that there's anything there that the Thunder are overly chuffed about other than that pick. Ricky Rubio will be perfectly nice. Like, he's a very good player. He's not necessarily a championship level point guard, not as a starter, but he is also like what's the opposite of notorious? Like a famously nice bloke. Like, everyone loves Ricky Rubio. He is awesome. Pretty strong leader in his own way, different kind of leader, maybe not the teacher kind of leader as Chris Paul is, but definitely like a camaraderie kind of leader in a way which I think would probably gel really well with Steven Adams, and actually would be quite fun to see them play together because you've got there's two non-American players there, which is always kind of interesting how that goes. B, Steven Adams was real good mates with Alex Abrinas while he was around, who's one of Rubio's Spanish teammates for the international team there. And then B, Rubio is a pass-first point guard to the point where he's actually quite a bad jump shooter. This time notoriously works. He's a notoriously bad jump shooter, which would probably mean maybe a few more like passes into Steven Adams in the paint. He might get to be used a little bit more in those areas. I think that would be just a really fun just fun to see how that goes. I don't see how Rubio would be considered part of a long-term plan for the Thunder, but their long-term plan is currently being built around guys like Shai Gilgeous-Alexander and Lou Dort and a few of their other younger guys. So, and of course, copious amounts of draft picks. But also an important point to remember about draft picks is they don't necessarily equal the players that they end up for them. Like, draft picks are also tradable assets, and if like the kind of things you use if, say, a superstar player becomes available in a trade or in a obviously not free agency, but just some kind of it's trickier for OKC because they are a small market. You're less likely to be able to do what Brooklyn did and be able to say, well, you can come live in New York, and Brooklyn's really cool these days. It'll be fun. Everyone wants to go there. Sean Marks did a great job, obviously, of rebuilding things from a basketball and organizational perspective, but then also just the destination helps too when it comes to being able to use that as free agency. That's why he was able to target that avenue. Don't think OKC could really do that, but they could trade for someone or they could draft someone. They've drafted them in the past is how they've got there, but that option is also over. Superstar gets frisky, which, as we've seen last couple of seasons, tends to be quite a common thing. It's no shortage of superstars getting frisky. At the moment, James Harden and Russell Westbrook, who are both guys that the Thunder drafted, each seem to be trying to race each other out of Houston at the moment, which is very funny. James Harden actually supposedly wants to go to either, if he does leave, and the Rockets are happy to keep them both, wants to go to either Philadelphia, which would be hilarious, or Brooklyn, which would be less hilarious because I don't like that fit nearly as much as I would like him on Philadelphia, where they can just be like everyone's least favorite team and lean all the way into that like the Clippers did back in the day. That would be awesome. Harden as a net, less awesome. I mean, we haven't even seen what the Nets look like with Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving together yet, and then you add another volatile superstar into that mix. I mean, it was already on the edge. I think that might be a bit too much, even for Sean Marks to be able to smooth over, let alone that they'd have to give up some of their very enjoyable younger depth players that they've developed themselves to make something like that happen. But I also would be, at this point, still would be shocked if Harden doesn't start the season with the Rockets. The Rockets will figure out a way to make that work. Whether Westbrook is there or not is a different question, but still. So, swinging it back to the Thunder, I suppose, and Steven Adams' situation, it would... they're not going to bottom all the way out. A lot of their draft picks are from other teams, so they don't have the same incentive as like the 76ers once did to do the full-on tank. But clearly, like, they've hired their coach left because he didn't fancy being a part of a rebuild. Chris Paul has left, which signals pretty clearly the same thing. Danilo Gallinari's a free agent, so he's basically left. He's not going to re-sign with the Thunder. They have a couple good young players who are going to be part of their future for the next 5 to 10 years. That's sorted. Steven Adams, well, his contract does end this season. This is the last year of his big contract. He earns $27 million. He'll probably be the highest earner on the Thunder's roster by a bit of a distance. And I mean, I don't know what you do with that, because I think they would be... There's obviously no rush to trade Steven Adams from a basketball perspective. He's not a player who takes them over the top or vice versa in the way that Chris Paul did. You know, he's not going to have that level of influence, but he's also, at this point, I think the longest serving player on the roster. He is absolutely beloved to the fans. He is a fantastic guy within the culture of the team. In fact, he's probably a culture setter. A lot of things he would say he learned from Nick Collison, and Nick Collison stayed around for a long time at that franchise, doing things even after he stopped being a factor on the court. Like, Steven Adams has a lot of those same aspects at an age where he's still going to be a very valuable NBA player for several years. Whether they trade him or not will depend, like, because all of that adds up to the fact that they don't need to trade him and they won't particularly want to trade him. However, we know last year that they were open to calls at least, and I don't think we mentioned either that Dennis Schroeder got traded the other day as well too. So there's another one of them, you know, taking back assets and trading high as well. I think they got more for Paul and Schroeder than they gave up when they traded for them in the first place, like comfortably, not even close. I remember Chris Paul, how did they get Chris Paul was when they traded Russell Westbrook to the Rockets. They got draft picks back for that too. So they got draft picks with Chris Paul and then traded him for more draft picks. I would not be surprised if you see them flipping Kelly Oubre for more draft picks as well. That seems like something that would be likely. I don't know if those agendas add up entirely. Therefore, there's also, I mean, it's just a matter of you get what you can. Like, you hoard in assets, you get everything you can, and then you figure out what you can do with them later on. And there's not necessarily, like, there's always a level of flexibility. Do we trade for someone? Do we draft with these picks? Do we trade up in the draft? How are we going to make this work? They've got so many options because they've got so many assets. Steven Adams could add to that, or he might not. I think what we've seen from last year, when he had a little bit of trade buzz around him, is that there's not a huge marketplace for centers. The Atlanta Hawks were the only team that really pursued him. Like, there are a few other teams that were rumored, but the Hawks were the only ones that really seemed to go out of their way to try and get him. They ended up getting Clint Capella, who was cheaper, both in terms of salary and in terms of what it cost to get rid of him. So that more or less closes that door. I just don't see much of a market for him. Maybe now that he's an expiring contract, that makes him an option for a team that wants a defensive-minded big man going into the playoffs. Wouldn't be a terrible situation for Steven Adams either if he did end up in that kind of thing, like traded to, I don't know, an LA team or something to try. Well, it wouldn't be an LA team, but you know, in the way that the Lakers used Dwight Howard, or in the way that the Warriors back in the Andrew Bogut, maybe Adams could be picked up by a contending team to play that sort of role, like fewer minutes, but a very defined role for a very good team, and then be a free agent afterwards to go pick his next destination. Like, maybe that wouldn't be a terrible idea, but I just don't see a lot of opportunities for that to where his value on the trade market is worth more than his value to the team and in the team. And it's not about on the court, because they're looking to develop a team in the future. They don't really care how many games they win. That's not the priority. So, it's very, it's 50-50 in that they might trade him or they might not trade him. But just thinking about the landscape, I'm leaning fairly strongly towards I would be quite surprised if he went anywhere.
Like, obviously, when you just view Steven Adams' career, the role of the big man, the center, which is his position, has changed drastically just throughout his career. So it's a bit of a mindfuck when you're someone like Steven Adams and you've got to try and figure out how do you fit into the NBA now as a big man. Like, you basically got to be if Steven Adams wants to be continue at this level, you kind of got to be a shooter and do your team first defensive stuff, And that plays into this feeling I have where it seems as though, like, just from a casual Kiwi sports fan perspective, we love Steven Adams, so that means we love the Oklahoma City Thunder. And now we're moving into a period where me as the fan, I have to open my mind to all the possibilities that are going to come with Steven Adams and what, because as you said, like there's every chance that Steven Adams' next few years is just joining a different, because that's kind of what the big men are doing at the moment. Like, unless you're a certified legit Anthony Davis, Giannis, whatever it is, you kind of got to get in where you fit in, or else you end up as one of the non-relevant big men who earn a lot of money, but they don't actually do anything. So it's like, you, just from a Kiwi perspective, we've become very comfortable with Steven Adams as an Oklahoma City Thunder player. I get the sense that the next few years might be a bit more shifty for Steven Adams as far as, okay, now my opportunity is with this team in this role, and they're a contender, so that's cool. Now this year I'm going to be off to this team, and now my role is here, and they're a contender, and it's cool. I think we just became so comfortable with Steven Adams as an Oklahoma City Thunder player, where now it's a different phase of his career, and it's probably more about the role and the fit and the opportunity as it is to us loving Steven Adams at the Oklahoma City Thunder, right?
Yes, but I do hold out hope because I'm thinking about different teams where, like, there's most teams either have a big man, and it's not a situation really anymore where you need two. Like, you don't have the starting center and the backup. You might have a starting center and then a big man who's actually like a stretch five, who's in an older era would have been a power forward, comes in, shoots a lot, can hit 3-pointers, that kind of role. Or you have someone like that starting, and maybe you have a JaVale McGee type guy on the bench, but that's a JaVale McGee type. That's not a Steven Adams type, and Steven Adams earns a lot more money. Like, his contract is what makes this tricky to see, because if he was willing to play for $5 million or something, like, and it'll be very curious to see what he does. Well, first of all, he could still re-sign with the Thunder. I would imagine he's eligible pretty soon for an extension. It could be done before the next season if they want it to be done. They might not want to tie themselves up financially when they're busy trying to transition between eras. But yeah, there's just, like, there's Rudy Gobert, but there's not a lot else. And to be Rudy Gobert, you have to be the best defensive player in your position, capable of guarding players a lot smaller than you. Adams is very good at the defensive stuff. He's not quite Rudy Gobert. Like, someone like Andre Drummond, his career is, I had to look up to see where he's playing now. I remember when the Pistons traded him, but I couldn't remember where he went to. It was actually to Cleveland. So that's not exactly a primetime destination these days. It's just not, like, there's not a lot of teams that would want or need or don't already have a big man. And so, yeah, the options are limited. But one team who I think he could make a great fit on is Dallas Mavericks. And if that happened, then I would get to be, like, I would get to fall into those support the team, support Steven Adams, support the whole process element. That would be awesome. Like, considering how many people became OKC fans in this country because of that. Suddenly I'd be able to see, like, Dirk Nowitzki jerseys for sale at Rebel Sport and Sterling Sports again, which they haven't been the case for at least a decade. I always have a look, even though I already have one, just to see if they would be available. Never are. Maybe that'd switch the old thing. That would be awesome if he played for my team. But I also don't know if the Mavs. I think they're as good an option as any other team in terms of his fit and the likelihood of that happening. I just don't know that there is a likelihood. But you did spark a pretty interesting idea while you're saying that. I reckon, because we know he practices 3-pointers, and he talked about it before last season. And he was saying, like, I'm not going to start shooting them just for fun. It's going to have to be, like, the right time in the game. It's going to have to be, like, I'm going to need the green light. I'm not just going to, like, take on the play myself and just, like, shrug everything off. Oh, I've got a good look. I'm going to take the shot the way that some players have that green light to do. He was never going to be like taking that upon himself. We did see a little flex in preseason where they tried that, but he did make a 3-pointer last season. It was a half-court heave, though, with one hand. It wasn't exactly like the kind of thing he'd been practicing for several years, trying to work on his technique and whatever. But there is a new coach now at OKC, and they are working a little, and it's a coach who was, I think was the assistant who's been promoted up. So clearly, like, pathways, again, are a factor in that. And I'll just say that I think if they are looking to grease the wheels around the league to trade him, like if they are looking to build up his trade potential, then you'll see him shooting 3-pointers early in the season. I like if that happens, then I think that means that they're hoping to trade him and they're showing other teams that he can do. For example, what Brook Lopez, before he went to Milwaukee, or actually Marc Gasol's a better option because Brook Lopez could always shoot it, but Marc Gasol couldn't and wouldn't, and was a very similar type of player to Adams, maybe a little sort of burlier and whatnot, and playing for a team like if you got Zach Randolph next to you back in the day, then that helps as well. But Marc Gasol just in the last few years, and he's not the only one, there's a few other centers that have started doing this as well. You don't have to shoot a lot of them, but just like 2 or 3 a game just to show that you're capable. And if you can hit one of those 3, shoot them at 33%, then that's enough to change the entire outlook of the way your team sets up defensively against your team. It's going to give a few more opportunities for your quick guards running down the lanes and all those kind of things. So if we do see Steven Adams starting to flex a few 3-pointers just to show that he's capable of them, getting, just those 2 or 3 per game, I reckon that's a good sign that they're hoping that they're hoping / think that they can trade him later in the season. If we don't see that, I just don't see how there would be a marketplace. Because teams aren't going to trade for him and then have a look to see if he can do what they want him to do. They're not going to trade for someone that they're not sure fits. They're going to have to see it ahead of time. And Sam Presti has proved this week, once more, as he proves every offseason, that he knows how to squeeze every last drop out of a trade. He knows how to when to trade high, how to get the best value out of these things. Like, he's a very, very clever general manager. That's not going to happen without that. So, I mean, if he's going to be able to do that with a Steven Adams trade, it's going to have to be a Steven Adams who shoots 3-pointers. So that's something to keep a very, very close eye on as the new season comes along, which might be sooner rather than later. I don't know what they're up to now in terms of, they keep having little leaked dates over when they think the season might start. I don't know, at one point they were talking about December before Christmas, but I would be stunned if that happens. I don't know. But then again, money talks. So whenever the next season does happen, that will probably be one of the first things I'm looking for to see if that does, like if Steven Adams suddenly is posting up triples, because I think that would be a very telling point.
Well, there is a video on YouTube, if you search Steven Adams Wellington Saints, a 18-year-old Steven Adams, and back in 2011, a little highlights package of him playing for the Wellington Saints, and in this highlights package, he does drain a 3-pointer. So, he does do it.
There you go.
He did it a long time ago.
And he hits them in training too. There are videos of him at shoot-arounds. He used to have 3-point contests with Enes Kanter, so he can do it.
Whoa. Don't compare training to Steven Adams playing for the Wellington Saints. Don't do that. Don't mention those kind of things.
No, of course. So one level of prestige is...
Yeah, right. Yeah. Oh, shit the bed. I will also, with Sam Presti, the thing out of Oklahoma City Thunder is it's been mentioned a bunch of times that he does work with the players as far as finding them the right destination. So if he's going to trade someone, like trading Chris Paul, it's a process working with the player to trading them to a destination where they are going to be happy. He's not just like, nah, fuck you, trade you away, go over there. He does like to maintain good relationships and help his players out. And from all angles, the most beautiful thing would be Steven Adams does right by the Oklahoma City Thunder. The Oklahoma City Thunder do right by Steven Adams, and it's happy families. It's all good. Wildcard, you can take us straight to the Flying Kiwis desk if you want, or we can chat a little about the Premiership, because I did catch a bit of the Auckland City versus Eastern Suburbs game, and I, as far as a bit of afternoon viewing goes, am partial to a bit of Premiership football, just flicking through the channels. And I will say, shout out to the New Zealand football, because as someone who doesn't partake in football, like yourself, there is already more information for me with the Football Premiership than there is with this New Zealand Hockey Premier League hockey, where New Zealand Hockey have done an absolutely terrible job of just trying to put information to the point where you can't cover it. There's no team list, there's no results table, there's zero information to help us or other people cover that competition and give it the publicity, not necessarily that it deserves, because the way we operate is we can only cover so many sports, and we can only invest so much time into so many sports competitions and teams and players, that it kind of becomes a matter of, well, if you do your job to the best of your ability as far as presenting a competition with enough basic information goes, we're there with you and we'll support you and we'll do it. However, if you're not doing your job adequately enough, it just falls away because there's so much other sports to cover. And that's how I feel about the Premier League hockey event, which is just more of a sporadic 2020 COVID kind of competition. And that's exactly how it's kind of being treated from New Zealand hockey. So that's just a bit of insight from our perspective with a lot of these domestic competitions. It's a lot of it is up to the national governing body and what they're up to as far as delivering a competition that can be covered. Because for some reason, some of these organizations don't think about how insightful the coverage around their competition can be, and thus how successful the competition can be. And that is, I'm sure you've got gripes with some of the Premiership stuff, but on a basic level, it's all there. It's all pretty fun. There's great social media coverage from New Zealand football, like the videos of the goals and just little highlights package, men and women as well, which is all pretty cool. So I don't know if you want to talk more about the Premiership or some Flying Kiwis matters. I just want to give a shout out to New Zealand football and what they're doing with the Premiership, because even as someone who doesn't necessarily follow football that much, I can still tune in, I can still check in on things, and I can still have fun as a sports fan. Whereas, I'm a hockey fan, that's why I want to cover hockey, but New Zealand hockey make that difficult, and that's pretty shitty. So shout out to football, shout out to New Zealand football, shout out to the local Premiership as well.
Yeah, I mean, I couldn't imagine not having league tables and whatever. That's the most basic thing out there, is to be able to keep those things updated and available. How can anyone cover anything if there's no information, That's madness. I still, like you said, I still do have gripes with the way that the Premiership is covered. It's very frustrating when for a week and a half ahead of the men's season, I was trying to, actually they had the same problem with the women's preview as well. I'm trying to write a preview and I can't end up doing it till a couple for the first game of each season. And even then it's not fully to the depth I would like it to be, because multiple squads haven't been named. And that's not strictly New Zealand football, although they have done wider full, squad lists in the past, just missing all the team squad lists. It would be nice if somehow something could be done to which players are going to play. Like if I'd known that Waitakere United had made a couple of the signings that they'd made, I would have been raving about them in the preview the same way I was raving about them in the week 1 write-up, because like clearly if like there's the dude Alex Grieve who's just come back from college in the States where he was outstanding, and he was probably the best player in the entire competition in round 1, and like Angus Kilcolly as a striker there, and there's a bunch. Like they made some great signings and retained most of their best players from last year, and I wasn't even to know I didn't know they kept their English goalkeeper. When I was writing the preview, how was I supposed to know that? I just assumed most of the imports had played. I don't know which imports stayed in New Zealand over the pandemic, which didn't, because anyone who left wasn't coming back. So, yeah, that stuff is infuriating, and New Zealand football has stepped up their game with some of this, and incorporating the women's stuff as well has been a great addition. They did do a goal of the week thing where they labelled 2 of the goals to the wrong goal scorer, and I wouldn't say even that they were the best goals in those games, but still, you just want that one way or another. You just want that visibility, which is the most important thing. So that's cool. We can forget about playing Kiwis. There's nothing really going on there. It was an international break for the men. Actually, this was the weekend that the All Whites were supposed to be at Wembley, so that's what happened there. And so the women still played, but there wasn't it was frustrating because the men were on a break, on the international break. The English football, the women's football, made a big thing about it. It's Women's Football Week, and there was heaps of promo and stuff, but then all the New Zealanders basically didn't play, except I think Michaela Moore played half a game off the bench, and Rhea Percival always plays, so that goes without saying. But they had a real frustrating game. They should have won. Consider late equalizer against a team that had gone down to 10 men. 10 women, I should say. Like, just a frustrating game. It's been that way for Tottenham this season, but really not a lot to say. Although, you might be able to answer one thing that came up while I was researching. I was looking at an interview that Michael Vowd did. Backup All Whites goalkeeper Michael Vowd played with Sunderland a bit in the youth grades, then went to Holland. He's been at Willemsvee for the last couple of years. Has played twice, I think, 2 full caps for the All Whites. Was their star keeper at the last Under-20 World Cup. And is currently on loan in the second tier in Holland, Netherlands. And I was reading an interview with him where he was talking about his family, and sort of about how much his father is his inspiration and whatnot. His father passed away 5 or 6 years ago, I think. But got him into football and everything. His father was a Dutchman who moved to New Zealand and married a half Dutch, half Kiwi, half Dutch woman. They stayed here, raised their kids. But in the thing that was interesting, and obviously Michael Vowd as well, had almost got called up by the Dutch under-20 side at one point as well. So he sort of had a decision to make between the country of his father's origin and basically his family's origin, or the country that he grew up in, and he chose New Zealand in the end, where he was going to get better opportunities and where he felt more connected to, having come up through the age grade. So that was cool. He's a fantastic goalkeeper, just conceded 7 goals on the weekend, but that wasn't his fault. He'd actually kept 6 clean sheets in 11 games before that. All of that's nice little background info, but there's just this one little question they said in the thing. I don't know if this is bad Google Translate, but they said that he has a brother who is still in New Zealand playing hockey at the highest level. Are there any Vouds, W-O-U-D, in the hockey thing? Or probably wouldn't be able to tell if there's no communication there, but does that name ring a bell?
Yeah, I'd have no idea what's happening in the Premier League. The National New Zealand Premier Hockey League, that is. There is a Daniel Weld?
Could be. They didn't even say what his brother's name was.
Daniel Weld, who was named in the... I'm not sure what year this was, but it's a 2018 New Zealand under-18 men's squad. Daniel Weld. So he does play hockey, and he plays in Auckland.
That all adds up, I'm pretty sure, so he might be his brother. There you go.
For the mighty Howick Pakuranga, not super mighty, but shout out to Howick Pakuranga. They are a mighty hockey club. So a bit of sporting whānau there.
Yeah, maybe. Undocumented, but potentially. What did you think of the Auckland City game then? Did you see the penalty and I actually found it was a weird game at first because it was like one of the things that frustrates me about these leagues sometimes, and it's worse in the women's league, is the standard of some of the pitches, which are absolutely shocking. And it's like the least you can do is take care of your ground if you're going to be playing National League football on some of the dumps that we've seen, even in televised games over the last couple of years. But Kiwatia Street was an absolute peach. It looks like you could almost smell the freshly cut grass through the television screen. It looked gorgeous. And yet there were like two muscle injuries, a muscle injury where they didn't get subbed off as well, and a shoulder injury from a collision. So that's not the pitcher's fault, but none of them were the pitcher's fault. I think it's more because we had two Auckland teams. Auckland football scene during winter disrupted more than anywhere else, so probably just not a lot of game time, but still a little bit of a funky one that on the best looking pitch in the country, arguably, there was suddenly a bunch of injuries. But after that, in the second half, I thought it actually became a really fascinating game with both goalkeepers playing fantastically, including Cameron Brown on debut, who's for Auckland City, who's been around. Well, he is currently still around in the Olympic mix, like in the wider range for which goalkeeper. Michael Veld actually will be the starting goalkeeper at that Olympic squad if that goes ahead, but still. And it got increasingly enjoyable as that game went on, which is a lot of chances and lots of very good shots, lots of very good saves, and then ultimately got decided by an extremely dodgy penalty. But I found it a really enjoyable game, actually, and I thought I watched all four of the Premiership games because the other ones were also on the YouTubes, and found most of those to be pretty enjoyable affairs as well. It's a little bit different when I'm watching from a more of a writer's perspective and I've got things to look out for. I'm trying to figure out formations and who's playing where and whatever, and which players are the most relevant to keep an eye on and write about. But I bloody loved it, man. It was fantastic on the thing back, and I thought that Auckland City Eastern Suburbs game and you'd probably expect this from two of the better teams, and they weren't anywhere near mid-season form, and maybe that actually improved it a little bit because you got just a little bit more squeakiness in the defenses with people still figuring it out early on. But that was probably the most enjoyable and definitely the most competitive of the four games as well. So I don't know, did you have any thoughts or reactions to that one?
Definitely a crazy penalty call, but those are like, it's just so annoying. I don't want to get too crazy here. It's just in any sport where there's no like replay coverage, like you just gotta, like it's kind of the part of the fun of this level of sport, and why when you go to the sport you expect crazy shit like this to happen in front of your eyes, and without all the stuff around the professional sport level where it's like replay, stoppage, replay, blah blah blah, analysis, like VAR, whatever it is. And it's like, yeah, it was like definitely not a handball, definitely a terrible call, but it was fun, and it helped, like it added to the fun. In commentary
the better team did win as well.
They were talking about the dude from Eastern Suburbs, like the holding midfielder. I can't remember his name.
Campbell Strong? Campbell Strong, Sean Bright.
I think it was Bright.
Who was the other midfielder?
And
Sean Bright's an Ole Academy guy.
I just remember there was always a dude for Eastern Suburbs in that holding midfield, and I was just following the game, and there was always this dude just getting the ball, making a pass, making the pass, and I didn't pay too much attention to it. Then they brought it up in the commentary, and I watched it a bit more closely, and those are the players who are the most important players. However, across like football and most sports, those are the players who get overlooked as for like the best player or the most eye-catching player. And what they were saying in the commentary, and then as soon as they say it in commentary, you're more tuned in to what's happening, And especially as someone who, if I'm watching a different sport, even if I'm watching one of my go-to sports, and then even more so if I'm watching a slightly different sport, where I still understand what's going on, I can still follow the thing, I can still analyze little matters, and still tap into whatever skill I do have as far as viewing sports go, but then it's like another layer when that insight comes from the commentary and you can kind of focus in on what's happening. And I just remember, apart from, good moments from other players and little good bits and bobs, just sitting there and watching, I think it is Bright, in the midfield, receive the ball and shift the ball. Like, from a coaching perspective, that is such an important role in any of these sports where you're moving the footy. Even in a sport like rugby or rugby league, yeah, you can't pass it forward, but you think about rugby league, there's always a connecting player. There's always a player who catches a pass and makes a pass. That is not their specific job, but it's a key element of what they bring to the team. Whether it's hockey, whether it's football, a lot of other sports, even basketball, like a lot of the time if you drive to the basketball hoop and then you flick out a pass and then another guy has to catch the ball and they have to make a decision, what do I do with this ball? And the longer they make that decision, the more the play breaks down. So you kind of have to know catch and pass before you even get to the catch and pass point. But the thing about football and hockey is that role is pretty much like all you're going to do in the game. And just being able to receive the ball, like if you receive the ball from the right, you get it moving to the left. If you receive the ball from the left, you get it moving to the right. If you receive the ball from one of your centre backs, your job is to turn and distribute the ball. And I'm not sure how old that Bright dude is, but he looked pretty comfortable and cool and calm under pressure. And I think, if I remember correctly, Eastern Suburbs do a lot of the wing-back type of stuff, where the goalkeeper would push right up to where the two centre-backs are, and then the wing-backs push right up, and it just elevates the whole team further up the field. But the whole time they did that, there was that fulcrum of the holding midfielder getting the ball, passing the ball, get the ball, pass the ball, get the ball, pass the ball. And especially when you think of like grassroots Kiwi footy, maybe this ties into the Ole way and those connections there, but there is kind of that grassroots Kiwi footy where it's like, who can kick the ball the hardest? Who's got the biggest boot? Send it route one, and then we'll start playing from there. Where obviously, with how they're promoting their wing-backs, how they hold possession, that's a Ole way type of football, but for an entertaining game, and a game that kind of presented a lot of opportunities for both teams, and as you said, mid-season, a lot of those opportunities are probably capitalized on, but a lot of the basics were pretty interesting to watch, and just how they like built up their style and what they were trying to do.
Yeah, Eastern Suburbs are a team like I did say in the preview before I had a look at Waitakere, and also got to see how well Hamilton Wanderers played. Although I will say Waitakere against Canterbury weren't bad, but they just weren't good either, and being dead neutral and not creating anything on attack is not a way to win you many games in this league. They look like they're strengthened from last year for sure, where they look like a team that might still be in the same problem where they just keep losing 2-1 because they can't quite score the goals. But then again, they got a fantastic striker in Galvin Coughlin, so it's just a matter of getting them the ball some more. I'm more optimistic about them than I am about Hawke's Bay, who Hamilton smoked 3-0. Hawke's Bay looked like they might struggle. Didn't really create anything of note, but Hamilton play, I think, Auckland City this week. A much better test of where they're actually at. But I rated the hell out of how they played, and I thought they, with that asterisk included that they were potentially playing the weakest team, that's still a team that should be pretty formidable, and they always are most years. They they have runs of like 3 or 4 wins in a row, but then they just can't be consistent enough to over a full season to make the semis or whatever. So maybe they make that run this year. I don't know. Waitakere clearly have a very strong team, but Eastern Suburbs did look like the third best team on paper for sure. And considering the first two are always the first two, like Auckland City and Team Wellington for the last half a decade, you don't even have to think anymore about who the top two are going to be. It's just a matter of which order. Yeah, like that's a strong Eastern Suburbs team, and like you say, they do like to push their full, but they don't play with a back three like a lot of other teams with like clear wing backs who are basically starting off in midfield positions. Like Team Wellington, for example, Jack Henry Sinclair might as well be a wide forward, even though he's playing technically in defence. But the way they do that, as you astutely mentioned, is that Reed Drake's the attacking midfielder. His brother, Daniel Drake, the goalkeeper, does like to step right up. He's very comfortable with the ball at his feet, allows their centre-backs to push a little bit wider, allows their full-backs to push a little bit further. I'm reading Johan Cruyff's autobiography at the moment, and he talks a bit about the total football things, and it's just interesting getting these little, it's not the most like rivetingly written book I've ever read, but it does have like, just every now and then you get these little nuggets of gold about how like football is a game about utilizing space and things like this. And it's like, yeah, that's what I came for, buddy. That's what I'm here for. And that's like an example of that. And then the other thing to be able to do that is having a midfielder who can drop deep into the back line, pick up the ball, distribute it, kind of thing. And Eastern Suburbs always have one of those, and it's always an Ole guy. It was Harry Edge a couple years ago. It was Adam Thomas last year, and he played at right back in this game. So really nice and versatile. He's probably more of a defensive player, to be fair, but did a perfectly commendable job there last time, and now it seems to be Sean Bright. And to answer your question, Sean Bright, 18 years old. That was his first game at this level. He's one of the better ones coming through at the Ole Academy, and they're always trending pretty young there. But yeah, it's very clear, like, that of the kind of players that they develop, they always seem to have a couple guys coming through in each little crop who can do that. Like, it's not quite Andrea Pirlo role, because Pirlo would also be whipping 50-meter passes right onto someone's foot, like at the end of a run. But give him a couple years, he might be able to do that. I think Bright's performance would have looked more noticeable as well had Eastern Suburbs been better going forward. I just don't think they clicked in attack very well. Didn't get Stephen Hoyle involved enough. The two best things Stephen Hoyle did were crosses, which is great, except you also want Stephen Hoyle on the end of the crosses. So that's a tricky one, because who did they have in their front line? Hoyle didn't play a lot last year because of injury, but he has been around the club for an extra year. They had Dan Edwards on one side, who's new to the scene, and Kingsley Sinclair, who's not really a wide player. He's more of an attacking midfielder or a striker, but it was playing out in left wing. So they didn't really click in the way they would hope to, given a few more weeks. And I think that's probably why, like, if those possessions were being started off with great little passing around the back line, building into like overlaps down the wing and then crosses back in, or cutting through 1-2 pass edge of the box, get a shot off in space, then suddenly it's looking like you're sparking something amazing. As it is, it was just starting possessions that went kind of nowhere. They had a lot of ball and didn't do a lot with it, but that's week one for you. That's how it goes.
Shout out to Albert Riera as well. He's in that same role.
Yeah, big
and
cameo.
One thing,
and Mario Illich and Cam Howison. Auckland City basically had 3 of them in that game.
Yeah, Howison's he's a bit more everywhere though. Yeah, like he pops up everywhere.
He's probably more of a box-to-box type, proper central midfielder.
Because one thing I noticed about, just while I'm on the, just on my journey of astute football observations, Albert Riera, like
so far so good. Don't spoil it.
We know what Albert Riera can do from his time at the Phoenix. Pretty, like, he's not going to win any sprint races, but he's very good at the job he is given with most football teams he plays for. But the thing I noticed was just he's always moving. So with the ball, that makes a lot of sense, because you got to obviously you got to move into space, especially in that holding midfielder role. You're trying to get between in the little pockets behind the strikers to make sure you've got space to turn and pass. And so with the ball, always moving is a real obvious thing to do. Move into space, get the ball. Move into space, get the ball, distribute, blah, blah, blah. But the thing I noticed about Albert Riera is he's always moving without the ball in defense. So like what he did a couple times is someone received the ball, so if it's like in the Auckland City half defensively, and the whole kind of setup of the game is in the Auckland City half, you know how in football, like there's those moments where you're just holding on to possession, but you're not really like dominant. It's not a case of dominating territory, because that doesn't matter. You're just in possession and you're manipulating the defense to create space. Albert Riera would like press up to the person receiving the ball, but then he's not necessarily just staying in that position. He's going to move over to press someone else, and then he's moving to press someone else. And whether that is just forcing the ball to go backwards, because you're stopping a movement and then moving over to the next little phase to stop that movement, and you might just push the ball all the way back to the fullbacks, whether that's side to side, whether that's in a more close confined space to stop entry into like the most dangerous point of the box. I don't know. But it was just, there were a couple plays there where Albert, like, he didn't stop just because he had done a job on one player, which I noticed with a couple other lads in the midfield was you do your job to like, not necessarily make a tackle, but you're just putting pressure on and forcing the attacker to do something with the footy, and then it's kind of like job done. So now I'm just going to kick back because the ball has swung somewhere else, and my thought process isn't necessarily, okay, what's my next job? But for someone like Albert Riera, I imagine highly experienced, he knows what he's doing, and extremely fit, obviously. He just like jogs to his next job. Jog to your next job, jog to your next job. And it kind of just shut down a lot of the attacking movements of Eastern Suburbs just from memory. Because he would plug one little movement or plug one passing lane, and then he would immediately shift into a next job plugging somewhere else. And I'm not sure if that's like a key factor in Auckland City's defense, but if we're talking about holding midfielders in football, your job is to always kind of be there in front of the defensive line. And so if you're not there, you're not doing your job. So if you get caught somewhere else and you're not moving to do your next job, you're leaving your defensive line vulnerable. And it was just like real solid. Maybe it's just easy for Albert Riera at that level. I don't know. But it's just something I noticed that he did really well. It was just always moving, always jogging, and not stopping just because he had made one play in defense. Like, it was like onto the next one, onto the next one, onto the next one, and it just shut everything down.
Yeah, this is sounding like more Cruyffisms as well, where it's like Cruyff notoriously smoked throughout his whole career. He wasn't there's a story about the first chapter of the book as well about how when he was with Ajax, they'd go on like a preseason kind of, big, I don't know, running a half marathon or something, like a big old jog in preseason, get everyone's fitness up, and they'd go in two different groups, and he'd always go in the first group and then hide in the trees, wait for the second group to come along and then run with them. So he'd end up doing one less lap by the end of it. And just like tricks like that. Like, he's clearly not the most committed to his overall fitness, but the way he explains it, and he's not wrong either. He's like, football isn't as often seen as a game about power and dynamic movements and physicality, and he's saying like it doesn't, like, sure it can be, but at the very best level, it's not. It's about anticipation, and you don't have to be able to sprint faster than anyone else if you were already in the right place ahead of anyone else. You know, if you can anticipate the game to that level, know where the pass is going to be, shut that guy down so you don't have to sprint in, or even worse, get there late and have to like risk a card with a sliding tackle or a late challenge or something. You know, it's if you know where the ball's going to go, and if in this situation we're talking about a defensive-minded player, so like say Reed Drake, for example, is an attacking midfielder for Eastern Suburbs. He's the kind of guy who would be in that area that someone like Riera or Mario Ilic, doing a lot of similar things, would be patrolling. It's just a matter of close them down so they're not a passing option, then they have to pass backwards or sideways or something, and cutting off the passing lanes, and just like, or even just like, another thing Cruyff talked about is the way his Dutch team would press, which is he knows that this defender is a right-footed player. So when this guy's got the ball, he rushes up on his right-hand side to force him to play off, like, because he know, like, to either play off his weaker foot or to play through on his stronger side, but under more pressure. But then to do that, he has to push up, which means that there's gap behind him, which means that another player is moving, like, it's almost like a wheel thing where one player moves and it drags everyone else around. Like, the next guy comes along to stand in that spot, which means someone else has to go cover his spot. And if you could do that like 3 or 4 ways down the thing, the gap you're leaving, because somewhere is a gap. There's 11 versus 11 regardless. So somewhere when you do this, you're leaving a space, but you just got to win the ball before they can access that space that and it's just a gamble of where the space is, how to crowd it. And then often, he was saying, a lot of the times they would have a lot of players crowded in a relatively small area, and it's just about pass and move and let the ball do the work and all that kind of thing. This is the stuff I'm always so fascinated about with football, because I just don't know there's another sport which hockey does have some of it because it's a similar style of sport, but I think the speed of it is slower because you have to wield a stick, whereas football is just what you've got in a ball. And it's just, it's so fluid to the point where it's almost like a blank slate of a sport, and everything is like, because of that, you can sort of picture or express it in whichever way you choose. You can make football that kind of burly, physical, kind of English style game, or you can make it the ultra technical, tactical Dutch style, which was also then very, through Cruyff specifically, very influential on like Barcelona and Spaniard type football that we got later on, which is extremely technical, maybe a little more like artistic flair in the mix. And then Germany, which is very tactical, very direct, very sort of blockbusting kind of high pressing, but not necessarily high, like, it's physical, very physical, but in a different way to which like the English side. And then you just, Italian football is slower, more controlled, and you just get all this, like, it's just really fascinating how you get, for example, those are all nations that I mentioned, and the way that their styles of football represent the people in that way. And then you can chuck it into various, like, when sports cross over into politics, there's a lot, especially in like South America, there's been a lot of that as well. It's just like endless potential to extrapolate from this kind of thing, because football is just a very pure sport ultimately at its very heart, I guess.
Oh, that's pretty cute, isn't it? A little bit of shout out to football.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah. Well, you kind of wrapped it all
Other
up.
sports have some too, of course.
No, that's a lovely ode to football you did there, Wildcard. The blank canvas. We shall wrap it up there, shall we? Shall we?
Yeah, I guess that's it.
We'll be back next week with some more Kiwi matters. There might be some bit more clarity on what Stephen Adams is up to. We'll have a full round of Plunkett Shield, the full first stanza of Plunkett Shield to suss out. And yeah, we'll be here over the next few days as well, writing about all sorts of sports, so check that out. And do remember that there is the special Patreon episodes for each week, to digest if you want to be part of the Patreon whānau as well. So kia kaha to yourselves, stay beautiful, and we'll see you next week. Bye. Chip.